You've served in the state Senate now for 2 decades.
Yes, 20 years.
You're now looking at potentially a new job, though.
Yes, I am.
Tell me about that.
The 13th Congressional District, there's an opportunity there. I have already announced my candidacy for the 13th Congressional District. That seat is currently held by Congressman David Scott, and I am looking forward to representing the 13th.
Now, you're a Democrat. Congressman
Yes.
David Scott is also a Democrat.
Yes.
You are challenging an incumbent member of Congress from your own party.
That's correct.
Does that worry you at all?
It does not. And the reason why it does not worry me is because I don't think it's a secret to anyone that Congressman Scott has had some medical issues. Congressman Scott has been removed from his committees up in D.C. Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries moved him as ranking member. And there's been multiple articles that have been written about his issues that he's currently facing up in D.C.
When you say issues, I just want to be really clear. Are you talking about, in your view, cognitive decline?
Well, that is mentioned in one of the articles, yes, by members up there that have served with him. And his health issues, of course, he's missed a great deal of the session because of some surgeries that he's had. And you don't get removed as a ranking member from a committee unless the leadership deems you unfit to serve.
Up until this point, and as far as we know right now, he has not indicated in any way that he does not plan to run again. So this will likely be, given all we know right now, a contested primary, unless you know something we don't.
Oh, absolutely. I expect it to be a contested primary. I am ready to present to the public my record. I've served up here for the last 20 years. I got a long record of achievement and accomplishments. And I strongly believe that my voice will resonate out in the community.
I think if Congressman Scott, and I'm certain he's going to have plenty of opportunities to make these cases himself.
Sure.
But I'd imagine if he heard what you're saying now, he and his team would argue that that's not the case, that he's fit, he's able to serve. In a contested primary, you've got to imagine that those arguments are going to come out.
Sure.
What would be your response to that?
Well, this is not something that I've said. If you read what's been reported about why he was removed, you will see in those comments that they question, those that have served with him on the committees have questioned his fitness to serve. And that resonated with me. As a sitting member of Congress, when you get removed from committees, and that's where all of the work is done, is at the committee level. You have to question, how can you be effective if you're not able to serve on committees? 97, 98% of the work that we do in the General Assembly, those bills originate in committee, and that's where you have an opportunity to make the biggest impact.
We've talked about your likely opponent here, but there are broader reasons that one might be thinking about when thinking about running for Congress. You've served in the state Senate here in Georgia for 2 decades.
That's correct.
That's a long time, and the Georgia State Senate does a lot of serious business for the people. The U.S. Congress is a step up. Why do you want to run for Congress?
I have, as you said, I've been in the General Assembly in the state of Georgia for 20 years. I have a record of accomplishment from the day I entered back in the time I got elected in 2004 and I took office in 2005. I came in this body fighting. Janella Wilson was a kid who I read about before I even took office, and I came in 2005 with the intention of getting this kid out of prison. Myself, along with his then attorney, B.J. Bernstein, succeeded in doing that. And I have been fighting for kids like Janella Wilson ever since I've been in the General Assembly. I've authored countless legislation as it pertains to education. I am the champion, the PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. I'm the author of that legislation. The zero tolerance laws in the state of Georgia. There's pictures on the wall where Sonny Perdue signed that legislation into law. And I changed the zero tolerance laws, which is why kids aren't being locked up nowadays in our school system for frivolous reasons. I put one word in that law that said intent. So long as there was no intent for a child to do any harm, that child could not be sent through the juvenile justice system. That legislation has changed a lot of lives in Georgia. With Janala Wilson, that was the Romeo and Juliet provision that the Supreme Court affirmed, and kids aren't being prosecuted anymore for having consensual relationships with themselves that are 2 years their junior. So that's my record of accomplishment, and I've authored many other pieces of legislation in this body as well.
It sounds like what you were saying is you've been doing the job at the state level for a long time, and you're, in your view, ready to take it to Capitol Hill.
Oh, absolutely. And I live in the 13th district, and I understand that Councilman Scott does not. And the time that I've been in the 13th, I believe that there's a stronger opportunity to serve the public. I've been out talking to members in the 13th, and one of the things that they shared with me is, Senator Jones, once you're elected, will you open up an office in our district? And if you look at the map of the 13th, you can see it runs from the southern part of Gwinnett County all the way down through Henry County and Rockdale and Newton County as well over in Covington. And I believe that as a sitting legislator, congressperson, one office isn't enough. If you're going to really be responsive to the people, you should open up multiple offices in each of those respective communities.
If you are elected to Congress, your top 3 priorities would be what?
Oh, the same things that I've championed here in the state. Gun safety, that's an issue that I have legislation pending. That's going to be top of mind. Public safety as it relates to our schools. We have entirely too many mass shootings across the United States. I believe as of a few days ago, the number was 17 or 18 mass school shootings that had already occurred across the country. Those are the top 2 things on my list that I intend to champion when I go back into, when I enter the Congress.
You're a Democrat.
Yes.
You've been a Democrat your entire legislative life.
I have.
Right now, at the national level, there is a lot of questioning going on both inside the Democratic Party and from groups that are adjacent to the Democratic Party about what the road forward for them looks like, particularly after the 2024 presidential election. Donald Trump returns to the White House.
Yes.
What do Democrats need to do right now at the national level that maybe you think they're not doing enough of?
When you look at the accomplishments of President Biden, from the infrastructure bill, and you can just go on from there, the number of pieces of legislation that he passed that have made a difference in people's lives. The one thing that he haven't done is that he didn't sell that to the public. I think now we have a person in the office who's done a much better job of selling those few things that he's done in such a way and package them in such a way that people believe that he's going to do more. We haven't had that kind of packaging on the Democratic side. There's a
You think it's a messaging problem?
Oh, absolutely, it's a messaging problem. And that's really the crux. And we have to do a much better job at doing that.
How do you do that?
Well, first of all, you need new people, new voices, and you need new talent to come in and that can do a much better job of communicating effectively with the public. I think that's critically important. We have to listen to those that have been in office and just talk directly to the community. I mentioned about having multiple offices rather than having one office within the district. We have to do a much better job at going out there and selling ourselves to the public and giving them an opportunity to tell us what's important to them. We've not done that.
At an organic level, it sounds like you're talking about kind of old school retail politics, handshaking, showing up at the town fairs and festivals and the parades.
And that's what I've done my whole life. In the whole 20 years I've been in the General Assembly. And those out there that have re-elected me every time that I've run these last 20 years would tell you that. I've not seen in my part of the 13th district, which is South DeKalb and of course Henry County, I've not seen my congressman in 4 years. The last time I saw it was well over 4 years ago. It was down in a parade in Stockbridge. That wasn't, but there was no opportunity to have a dialogue with the person who was representing us at the federal level. And I believe as Democrats, we have to do a much better job of connecting with our constituents, because that's the only way that we're going to find out what the real bread and butter issues are. We have to understand what the public wants us to do in our service to them, rather than the other way around.
One of the tensions that some people talk about when they're having this conversation is that different constituencies want different things. And so even if you are a legislator who's really in touch with your district, which is your job as a legislator, no matter who you represent, that's your job.
Yes.
But if you are, some have argued that Democrats in particular right now represent a fairly wide and divergent coalition. There is a progressive wing, there is a more center-aligned wing of the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
How do you reconcile those things and chart a path forward?
And those constituencies are no different than what you find on the other side of the aisle either. They're not all of one mindset, although they've been able to do a better job in coalescing around a candidate than we have.
Why do you think that is?
It's all about messaging, it's all about communication, it's all about being able to come up with, I hate to use the term, quote, marketing, but that's exactly what the other side is much better at doing than we are. They're better at marketing themselves and marketing their ideas and getting people to believe that those ideas are going to eventually wind up in the law, when in fact we know a whole lot of them are not.
Let's talk about what's going on here under the Gold Dome right now, because we've been doing a lot of looking ahead to potentially what could come down the line, but there is a very active session underway right now here in the legislature.
Yes.
With a lot of pretty big and in some cases controversial bills moving their way through the system here. One that I think is a good place to start, particularly when we're talking about inside the Democratic coalition, the progressive wing, and how that conversation between them and a more center, maybe center-right Democratic wing is making sense of what's happening here in our politics. The first bill out the gate in your chamber, Senate Bill 1. If passed, it would restrict the access of people who identify as transgender girls and women. It would restrict them from participating in most sports in our state designated for women and girls. That bill passed out of the Senate recently. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I'm certainly a no vote. There's a role for politics in everybody's life. There's a role for government. And I don't believe being in someone's bedroom or in someone's doctor's office is a place for government. Those are decisions that have to be made by the parent and that child, rather than made by those of us up here that sit in these ivory halls of this building.
You think it's an overreach of a bill?
It is, of course it's an overreach. It's a problem in search of a solution. In sports, there's less than 10 cases nationally. And when I talk about messaging and marketing, that's what the Republicans have been really good at doing it. Taking an issue that really isn't a problem, but they're making it into one and doing a really job of messaging it to the masses and trying to convince all of us that they're saving our kids from those that are out there preying on them. And that really isn't the case as it pertains to transgender athletes and transgender students, by the way. They're not predators. Those are informed decisions that a parent should make, working directly with their child. And as you know, in our chamber, in the Democratic Party, in the state Senate, we have a parent who is facing those decisions every single day. And she's faced it with honor and grace, and she's shared her story. And when you sit down and listen to the parents, they know what's best for their children, not those of us up here that are making laws.
Let's talk about school safety. Right off the bat of our conversation, you pointed to school safety as a big concern of yours.
It is.
It's no secret Appalachia High School was the scene of a horrible tragedy in our state just a few months ago, at the end of 2024. What needs to be done to prevent another mass shooting like that in our state?
Well, I had the opportunity to chair a firearms safe storage study committee this summer, and we worked through the falls. And right in the middle of my committee that I was chairing is when this incident occurred at Appalachia High School. We were already discussing these issues and meeting with other stakeholders, not just in Georgia, but in other states as well. When that incident happened, I broadened the agenda for our Safe Storage Study Committee. And it was important to me that I not only listen to the experts and the doctors and the pediatricians that were attended, but I also listened to the parents. And we did. And out of the study committee, I've already introduced two bills, Senate Bill 52 and Senate Bill 53. And given the environment we find ourselves in a Republican-dominated legislature, I've said to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, this is the very least of what you can do in order to address this issue.
And what do those bills call for?
Well, the first bill, Senate Bill 52, calls for the state DOE, Department of Education, simply to promulgate some rules. Superintendent Woods has already endorsed this idea. In the middle of the shooting, I called him, and I had a conversation with his office, didn't speak directly to Woods, but I spoke to his number 2 in command. And I shared with him this idea I had, and I asked, do you have a mechanism in place? I've also met with other superintendents in the school systems I represent, both in DeKalb and Henry County, and I asked, how do you all get along? How do you all interact? Or what kind of data do you receive when a child leaves one school system and transfers to another? That's what happened in Appalachia. And
You're saying somebody got lost in the system as they were moving between school systems, and some of the challenges that maybe there were warning signs in one district didn't get communicated to the other district, right?
That is correct. And what got lost was those children that were receiving mental health care, and when they transferred to another school district, that information didn't follow. Of course, the grades and everything else will follow, their attendance records, all that follows it in the school system. But my bill calls for the Department of Education in the state of Georgia to promulgate some rules simply to identify those students that are receiving mental health care, that those records be transferred as well. That's one of the bills. The second bill is not a novel idea. It's something that Texas is already doing, something that Florida is already doing, it's something that North Carolina is already doing, something that Utah is already doing, all red states, by the way, that mirror Georgia. And they have, and I call this person a czar, if you will. They have a person that's in charge at the state level that's responsible for disseminating information to our institutions, educational institutions, from preschool all the way up through college. They're also responsible for everything as it relates to firearm safe storage, to collecting data, to working with industry, to working with those out there that have shooting ranges to make sure that information is pushed out there. They work with law enforcement. They work with SROs in the school system. And oh, by the way, Georgia has one of the best SRO programs in the world. That's another bill that I passed that Governor Deal signed into law, creating a unique certification for our school resource officers. They now have the same certifications as any other public service officer.
When you talk about this, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. When we're talking about this bill you have introduced that would create effectively a statewide czar,
yes.
This position, do you envision it as someone who is essentially a statewide champion of safe firearm storage? Is that what the role is, or is it more than that?
That is part of the role, but it's got to be so much more than that. It's got to be somebody that has access to research information as well. There's also federal dollars. Both Texas and Florida draw down on federal dollars to fund their programs. But it's got to be a champion. In the state of Utah, there's a former chairman, Republican chairman, by the way, who is the champion of everything related to firearm safe storage. And he shared with me, he said, Senator Jones, we don't have mass shootings in Utah. He's also the author of well over 21 bills related to mental health for kids. They get the services they need. And if Utah can do it, if Florida can do it, if Texas can do it, certainly Georgia can. You
mentioned SROs. There were school resource officers at Appalachia High School the day of that shooting. They responded pretty universally, have been lauded for how quickly they responded to that scene. But still, students were injured, still students were killed. Does part of the solution to preventing future mass shootings like that in Georgia have to involve restricting firearm access in our state?
Well, there's a bill that was in the Senate today, and this bill dealt with 11 days of tax-free holidays for firearm purchases. I don't believe we need to have more firearms in this state. We certainly have enough. And I want to restrict access to firearms by kids, by children, which is why I'm a proponent of firearm safe storage. There's a lot of, I'm not out there trying to champion the Second Amendment. I'm not. And I said repeatedly in my study committee, what we're doing and the work we're doing in this state has nothing to do with Second Amendment. We have to look at how do we protect our kids from having easy access to weapons. How do we, parents, safely store weapons so that kids don't unintentionally gain access to them? We got to look at ways that we can protect our children from gaining access to weapons that the parents or a caregiver may have in his or her home.
It sounds like your focus is on restricting access by children to firearms. If I'm hearing you right, your focus is not on restricting access of adults to firearms.
That's correct. Oh, absolutely.
Democrats around the country have very different views on that. Why do you land where you do on that position?
Because Georgia is 7th in the nation in terms of firearm deaths from unintentional shootings for young people, for kids. If you go to any hospital, ask any pediatrician, they'll tell you where the issue is. And if we can start with our children and have parents safely store their firearms so these kids don't have access to them, guarantee you by the time those kids grow up, they will be accustomed to storing their firearms safely themselves. I believe we need to start at the bottom. And as I said in many speeches for the state of Georgia, this is the very least that we can do in terms of protecting our kids.
We've covered a lot of ground here, Senator. I want to end here. If there is one issue, we've talked about a lot here, but as we close, I want to give you the opportunity to lay out sort of your future vision here. The most important, most pressing issue facing Georgians this year, in your view, is what?
There's several issues that I believe that are important to Georgians. I've shared with you my vision about firearm safe storage. But surrounding firearm safe storage, we got to do a better job in our local schools in ensuring that everyone has a stake in educating our kids. I believe, like others, that kids are really the future of this state. And if we can create programs and opportunities, if we can do a better job in bringing in educators so that we can communicate the importance of safe storing firearms, so we can communicate the importance of kids being able to work together across race, across gender. If we can just communicate with kids in our classroom the importance of building this, I was born in the civil rights era, this beloved community. I believe that's where we need to focus our efforts, on our kids in our classrooms.
Senator Jones, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, we repeatedly reached out to Congressman Scott's team to invite him to respond to Senator Jones's comments in an on-camera interview or in writing. They did not respond by the time of this taping. Scott, who is now in his late 70s, was tapped to lead the House Agriculture Committee in 2020. He is still on the committee, but this year he is no longer the Democratic Party's leader on it. Now, a lengthy Politico article in 2022, citing mostly unnamed sources, claimed a number of Democratic lawmakers had concerns at the time about Representative Scott's performance leading that committee. In response, he told the outlet he was as strong and vibrant as a roaring lion, and he dismissed the criticism as a thinly veiled attempt to unseat him from the influential committee leadership post.